The poor girl was singing while cleaning the Mustang, until she began to cry when the millionaire walked up. The worn cloth slipped between her small fingers, already raw from so much scrubbing. The sun hit hard on the hood of the black Mustang, gleaming as if it had just rolled off the factory line. But it hadn't. It was covered in dust when she got there, her knees scraped, her face smudged with soot. The girl was 7 years old and sang softly as she cleaned, an old tune, sweet, and filled with that kind of longing that sticks in your chest. The sidewalk beneath her knees was cracked and hot, and the rag she used barely soaked anything up. Still, she kept at it. Maybe deep down, she believed that shine might earn her a glance, or a piece of bread. The wind blew dry, swirling leaves, and trash around her. But she didn't flinch. She kept polishing the headlight like it was a gem. With each whispered verse, her eyes closed just a little, as if to push back the hunger that now ached all the way into her back. There was something solemn in her presence, as if she weren't there for money or crumbs, as if she were answering a promise. A mission whispered by someone who was never coming back. And then, the low growl of a luxury engine broke the silence of the street. The car stopped a few feet from her, a high-end SUV with dark tinted windows and gleaming chrome wheels. The poor door opened slowly. First, a polished Italian shoe touched the ground, then tailored suit trousers, and finally the face, tanned, sharp, wearing an expression of disbelief and a strange kind of sadness. He saw her, and couldn't understand. Why would a child be cleaning a Mustang on a random Tuesday in a forgotten part of town? But she understood instantly. As soon as she saw him, the rag dropped from her hand. The melody froze midair like it had been shot. Her big brown eyes welled up instantly. It wasn't fear, it wasn't shame, it was deeper. Something cracked inside like a string pulled too tight until it snapped. She started to cry in a way that didn't match someone so small. A cry of someone who remembers, who waited, who recognized. He took a step closer, hesitant. But the pain on her face stopped him. That expression, that look. Then she said, between sobs, You used to sing that song to my mum." It felt like the air vanished from the street. No sound. Not even birds, not even distant traffic. The man stood frozen. A warm breeze passed between them, but it didn't break the silence. He looked at her more closely now, the delicate features, the shape of her mouth, the way she fought back the sobs like her life depended on it. And her name slipped from him, unbidden, a whisper, Clara. But she didn't answer. She just ran. Barefoot, the asphalt burning her feet, she disappeared down the alleys. And he stood there in front of the Mustang, trying to understand what had just happened. But he didn't even know where to begin, and the worst was yet to come. The alley she ran into smelled of mildew, burnt oil, and lost childhood. Clara squinted as she ran, tears blurring everything. The ground was a patchwork of broken glass, oily puddles, and soggy cardboard. She knew every turn of that concrete maze, not with her feet, but with the memory of someone born inside the escape. The grey walls pressed in from all sides as if the world itself wanted to close in on her. She only stopped when her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She sat between two trash bins, hugged her knees and let herself cry freely. But he still didn't know the worst part. In the glass mansion on top of the hill, the same one where the Mustang had been bought years ago, Thomas Lowell stared at his own reflection. Not his face, but the past, cracking through him like a fracture in expensive glass. He remembered the song, the woman who used to sing it on cold Denver nights when the two of them shared a one-room apartment and two broken dreams. He remembered her eyes, the same ones he'd just seen, smaller and trembling in the girl's face. But there was a reason he never went back. He sat down on the Italian leather couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The phone had been ringing for minutes. He ignored it. His business partner, no doubt, calling to finalize the new real estate expansion in Chicago. But Thomas couldn't hear that world anymore. All he could hear was the girl's voice. That fragile, cracking voice that brought back a name he'd sworn never to say again, Helena. Across the city, Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand. The shack she lived in with her grandmother was made of thin wood panels and a roof that creaked with the slightest breeze. Donna Lourdes, an old woman with tired eyes and a curved back, greeted her in silence. She didn't ask any more why the girl cried. She knew her pain ran deeper than any answer could reach. Clara threw herself onto the thin mattress, covered her face, and whispered softly, "Grandma." He came back. It was as if an invisible window had opened. Lourdes's eyes widened. She grabbed her cane and approached, her steps slow but her heart racing. She sat beside her granddaughter, held her hand tight and murmured, "Are you sure, child?" Clara nodded, biting her lips to hold back more tears. He was there, in the black car. He looked at me, like he saw a ghost. But there was something no one expected. Lourdes stood with effort and walked to a corner of the shack, pulling out a box from beneath an old tarp. Inside, she found a yellowed photograph, nearly faded by time. She handed it to Clara with care, as if it were a piece of glass. The girl looked at it. In the picture, a young man smiled beside Helena, her mother, at some random park. Behind them, the same black Mustang, the same gleaming paint, the same sparkle in their eyes. Clara touched the image with her dirty fingers, as if trying to pull an answer out of it, and for the first time she whispered a question she'd never had the courage to ask. "Grandma, did he know? Did he know I existed?" The old woman's silence was louder than any reply. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply turned her face away and let time speak for her. Meanwhile, Thomas had made a decision to return to where it all began. He couldn't sit still. Something inside him had cracked again, and this time no amount of money, power, or contracts could fix it. He needed to know. He needed to understand why that little girl had recognized him, and why, when he looked in her eyes, it felt like he'd heard Helena's voice one last time. He drove aimlessly through the worn streets of the city, and that's when he saw it. A message written with a dirty finger on the back window of the Mustang. "She sings just like her mother." His blood ran cold, and then he decided to find her. But he had no idea where that would take him. The sunset painted the sky in a dirty orange hue, like the whole city was suspended in an unfinished dream. Thomas parked the car 1 block from where he'd seen the girl run. He didn't know what. He was looking for a clue, a glance, a shadow to confirm what he already felt in his chest. His heart pounded out of rhythm, as if it knew that crossing that street meant touching something buried for over 7 years. He stepped out slowly, his expensive shoes now coated in dust from the pavement, and he walked. But there was something he didn't expect to see. A ragged cloth doll sat on the edge of a peeling doorframe. Dirty and torn, it looked like nothing special, just another forgotten toy in a forgotten neighborhood. But he stopped. The doll's dress. It was made of blue floral fabric. The same fabric he'd seen years ago, stitched together by Helena, when she was piecing together a baby layette from scraps of old dresses. The memory hit hard. The same pattern, the same hand-sewn buttons. He stepped closer, touching the doll like one would touch a relic. He was in the right place, or maybe the wrongest place of all. Inside the shack, Clara watched through a gap in the wooden wall. Her eyes were dry now, no more tears. Just one thing remained: waiting. That heavy, silent kind of waiting only those who've been forgotten understand. She didn't move when she saw him stop and touch the doll. She just watched like she was seeing a scene from her own life, only she didn't know how it would end. Then he knocked on the door. Lourdes answered. Her face showed no surprise, only exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that comes from living, long enough to know that certain ghosts always come back. Thomas recognized her instantly. "Mrs. Lourdes?" The old woman simply nodded, her eyes steady, unflinching. "Is she here?" he asked. The answer took time. "You don't have that." "Right," she said flatly without raising her voice. That sentence got dropped like a verdict, but he didn't back away. If she's my daughter, I need to know. Lourdes took a deep breath. Now you need to, huh? After 7 years? After you left Helena with nothing but a note and an unpaid electric bill? The pain was instant, visible. He stepped back like he'd been punched, but he didn't argue. He just lowered his eyes, swallowing the guilt that had followed him even through luxury hotels and international flights. That's when Clara appeared. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, holding the doll. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just looked, and that look broke something in Thomas, something he didn't even know was still intact. No one had ever looked at him like that. Not in boardrooms, not in interviews. Not in the loneliness of expensive nights. It was a look that demanded one thing, one answer. Why? And he didn't know what to say. Why did you leave? She asked. The kind of question you ask like you're asking why the sky turns dark at night. Simple, cruel, impossible to explain. Thomas opened his mouth, but the words died before they formed. He crouched, trying to meet her at eye level. I was a coward. I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't even know how to be a man. And for the first time, his eyes welled with tears. Clara didn't flinch. She just gripped the doll tighter. Then Lourdes cut in, her voice thick. She doesn't need promises. She's heard enough of those for one lifetime. Thomas stood up slowly, defeated. I know. I'm not here to promise anything. I just want to see her sometimes, hear her sing. She sings like her mother. That's when Clara turned and walked back inside without another word. The door stayed slightly open, and with that a silent promise was born. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just a cruel question left hanging. What if it's already too late? And what he still didn't know was that Helena had left something else behind, something that would change everything. The next morning, light rain fell, washing dust from the sidewalks and whatever was left of hope in the air. Clara woke early as usual. The sound of water on the tin roof was oddly comforting. She remembered the night before, his face at the door, the face she had only known through scraps of stories her grandmother told in broken pieces. But seeing that face in real life, so close, so human, shuffled everything inside her. She wanted to hate him. She really did. But why then did the urge to sing return? Why now? Across town, Thomas stared blankly at his laptop screen. His business partner's messages flashed like sirens. We need you here. The New York meeting's been rescheduled. Chicago needs answers. But he could only think about one thing. The girl who looked at him like she held 7 years of questions no one had ever answered. Like he was a living riddle, and he was. His phone rang. He ignored it. Again. But Thomas was still hiding something. He opened the final folder on his computer, a series of old, unanswered emails, all from Helena. Most were short. She was born. She started walking. She sings. Brief notes like she already knew he wouldn't reply. Or worse, that he'd read them and pretend he hadn't. But the last one was different. It was still marked unread, even though he knew every word by heart. If you ever want to meet her, bring something blue. No, it was from me. The blue dress. The doll. Clara had recognized them, and that's what tore him apart. Back in the cramped neighborhood, Clara snuck into the overgrown yard behind a neighbor's abandoned house. It was her secret place, where she sang when she wanted to disappear, and she began, softly, almost whispering, the same melody that visited her in dreams, the one her mother used to sing to lull her to sleep, even when hunger growled in their bellies. But this time her voice trembled, because she knew he could hear her, and he did. Thomas parked far away, not wanting to be seen. He followed the sound like a man chasing a memory that refused to fade. When he got close, he saw her, back turned, hair wet from the rain, lips parting to release fragile notes. Then he broke the silence. That song, it was your mother's, but she learned it from you. Clara turned slowly, her face serious. Do you even know who I am? She asked. Thomas hesitated. I know what you mean to me, but I don't know who you are. Not yet. And that was a mistake. Because her expression shifted. "Yet?" she repeated. "You don't get that right." And she ran again, but not to the alley, she ran to school. It was Friday, and the teacher had promised her a brand new storybook, hardcover, if she sang in front of the class. And Clara wanted that more than anything. But there was something no one expected that day. Thomas, unaware, followed her. He watched as she slipped in through the side door of the community school. He waited outside, unnoticed, observing the bustle around him. Then he heard it, an announcement over the crackling classroom speaker. "Now our little Clara will move us all with a very special song." Silence swept the room. Children and teachers held their breath. Clara stepped up to the makeshift stage with a confidence that didn't match the past few days. She gripped the microphone with both hands, took a deep breath, and said, "This song belonged to my mum. She used to say that one day someone really important would hear it and feel something." She began to sing, and every note seemed to rise from a place untouched by pain. It was the voice of a daughter reaching for a space that had always been empty. And by the door, Thomas cried. He cried like never before, because in that melody, he realized what he had lost, what would never come back the same. But then, someone touched his shoulder. "Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to leave a like." The touch on his shoulder was light but urgent. Thomas turned sharply and saw a woman with a grave expression, her dark coat soaked from the rain. Her eyes, focused, determined, said it all. This wasn't a coincidence. "You need to come with me." "Now," she said firmly. Thomas blinked. "Who are you? What's going on?" "I'm a social worker. We received an anonymous tip about 3 abandoned children found by the roadside. And you're with them." Thomas felt his heart spike. "No, you don't understand. I found them. They were alone. The mother, my daughter, she died." The woman stared at him, skeptical. "Can you prove that?" "That?" Thomas felt the ground fall out from under him. He had no documents, no witnesses, nothing that could prove his version of events. Only a soaked letter, and the word of a frightened little boy. "Please, come with me. We need to clear this, up at the station. The children will be placed in temporary care." "No, they can't be separated. They already lost their mother. I'm their grandfather." "Can you prove that?" the social worker repeated firmly. Thomas looked at Tom, who was watching from inside the car, wide-eyed with fear. Lainey and Emile were still asleep, unaware of the chaos unfolding around them. "Tom, tell her who I am." The boy got out of the car and walked slowly toward them. He stopped beside Thomas and with a shaky voice said, He's the man in the black car. Mom said he'd take care of us." The social worker sighed, visibly moved, but remained professional. "That's not enough, sir. We need concrete proof." Thomas felt helplessness wash over him. All he wanted was to protect those children, but now everything was unraveling. "Please give me some time. I need to find something that proves I'm related to them." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You have 24 hours. After that, the children will enter the adoption system." Time was his enemy now. He had to act fast. He drove to his daughter's old house hoping to find documents, photos, anything that could help. The house was falling apart, but still standing. He searched every room, every drawer, until he found a shoebox hidden in the back of a closet. Inside were old photos, Tom's birth certificate with his mother's name, and the father's name left blank. She never told who the father was, Thomas thought, surprised. Among the papers he found a letter addressed to him. Never. Sent? With trembling hands he opened the envelope and read, "Dad, I know I was wrong to run away, but I was afraid of your judgment. Years passed and I missed you more and more. I wanted you to meet your grandchildren. They're everything to me. I hope that one day you'll forgive my absence and love them the way they deserve." Tears streamed down Thomas's face. That letter was the proof he needed. He ran back to the car where Tom was waiting. "I found something. Let's go to the station." At the precinct, he presented the letter and the birth certificate. The officer on duty read through the documents, then looked at Thomas. "This helps, but we'll still need more. A DNA test can confirm your paternity." "How long will that take?" "A few days." Thomas didn't have days. The clock was ticking on those 24 hours. He needed an immediate solution. "Please, let me stay with them until the results come in. I promise I won't run." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you'll be under supervision." Thomas nodded, relieved. He took the children to a nearby hotel where they spent the night together. He told them stories, fed them, cared for them like he never had the chance to before. The next morning, he got a call from the station. The DNA test had confirmed it. He was Tom's grandfather. The joy was overwhelming, but short-lived. The officer informed him that despite the results, custody still depended on a full evaluation by social services. Thomas knew the battle was far from over, but now he had a chance, and he would do everything not to lose it. Tom walked with slow steps but steady eyes. He could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to fall apart, again. The social worker looked at him, her voice soft. "Do you know this man?" The boy looked at Thomas, and for just a second, just one, he hesitated, not because he didn't believe him, but because he was learning that the adult world never came without secrets. Then he nodded. "Yes, he's my grandpa." The woman narrowed her eyes. "Are you sure?" Tom nodded again, this time more firmly. "My mom said if one day a man came in a black car with a shiny watch and sad eyes, that would be her." "Dad," she showed me an old picture. It was him." The social worker took a deep breath. Something in the boy's voice, in the clarity of what he'd said, broke through a part of her doubt. Even so, she had a protocol to follow. "I still need you to come with us to the station. And the babies, we need to take them in for medical evaluation. They're clearly malnourished. I'm taking care of them. I am taking care of them," Thomas said, urgency building in his voice. "You don't understand. Their mother died yesterday. They have no one left, only me." She wasn't cruel, but she had been trained to resist emotion. Her eyes searched Tom's, looking for something real. And then, without warning, Lenny began to cry in the back seat. A cry more like a lament than a demand. Thomas rushed to her, picked her up carefully, and the child for the second time went silent the moment she touched his chest. The social worker watched. And it was in that moment that doubt clashed with duty. "Okay, you can bring all three with you to the clinic. You won't be separated from them, but you need to understand, if the courts don't grant you custody, they'll go up for adoption." The word hit him like a blade. Adoption. To be taken again, ripped away again. Life was a cycle of loss he couldn't survive repeating. "They're my family," he said quietly, but with a certainty that didn't ask for permission. As the child, services vehicle escorted them to the nearest children's hospital. Clara, still at school, finished her song unaware of any of it. The teacher, moved, handed her the promised book. It was hardcover, blue. Inside, on the dedication page, was a blank space that read, "For the one you love most in the world." And she wrote, "For Mommy, and maybe for him." But no one expected what happened next at the hospital. As the doctors examined the children, they uncovered signs of long-term neglect, scars, chronic malnutrition, small marks that pointed to more than just poverty. Evidence that, despite her love, their mother hadn't been able to fully protect them. And then a name came up in the medical report. Then a man from Helena's past. It wasn't Thomas, it was someone else, someone she'd never fully spoken about. Thomas heard the name like someone recognizing an old enemy, the same name Helena had once scribbled on a forgotten note. "If he finds out the kids are alive, he might come back." The threat was real and close. The social worker, now convinced of Thomas's emotional bond with the children, began to act like an ally. But she was clear. If he has any legal right, and he could fight for custody, we need to move fast. Thomas looked at the three siblings sleeping in a makeshift room in the hospital, each with a blanket, each more vulnerable than the last, and in that moment he understood. It wasn't enough to want them, he had to fight for them, fight the past, the system, even his own blood. But there was one thing he still didn't know. The man from Helena's past and was already on his way. The hospital clock read 2:47 a.m. when Thomas finally allowed himself to sit down. He was sweating, eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled. But it wasn't physical exhaustion that weighed on him. It was the looming threat of loss, a second time. And worse, this time he would lose them knowing what they meant. All the emergency paperwork was filled out. He'd taken temporary responsibility for the children, but the head of the institution still looked at him with reservation. Final. Custody depends on legal verification and emotional stability. He thanked her, but inside he was falling apart. On the other side of the glass, Tom slept in a chair, his head slumped to one side, hand resting gently on the stroller where his siblings lay wrapped in thermal blankets. Each breath the babies took echoed inside him like a fragile memory of everything they could still lose. Then, the phone rang. He answered hesitantly. It was the social worker. Her voice came through steady, but low, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. He's here. He just arrived at the front desk. Says he's the father of 2 of the babies. Thomas froze. His heart skipped a beat. Name? Friedrich Kolbe. The name hit like a whip. It was him. The man Helena feared. The man she ran from. The father of Lenny and Emil. The one who never cared. Until now, for some reason, he had appeared and claimed he wanted to step up. Thomas stood so quickly, the chair behind him crashed to the floor. He sprinted down the hospital corridor like he was racing time itself. When he reached the front desk, he saw him, tall, long coat, clean-shaven, cold expression, like someone who always knew where he was and never lost control. "You're Thomas Wagner?" Friedrich asked, as if he already knew. "And you have no right to be here." Friedrich gave a half-smile. "We don't have that luxury, Mr. Wagner. They're my children. I want to see them." "You abandoned them." "Helena raised them on her own. She ran from you." "That's her version." He looked around. "But she's not here to tell it anymore, is she?" The words landed like a slap. Sharp. Final. Thomas stepped closer, breathing hard. "You showed up because you heard she was gone. What do you want? Money?" "I want my kids." But Friedrich didn't know everything. Helena had left more than letters. She'd left proof, photos, journals, fragments of pain put to paper, evidence of a life lived in flight. Thomas pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket. "Want to know what you did to her? Read this. Read what your children will. Know one day?" Friedrich took the envelope but didn't read it. He just looked at it, bored and cold. "This doesn't stop me from being their legal father." And that's when Thomas snapped. Being a father isn't DNA. Being a father is staying when they cry for no reason, when they're scared at night. When you have no idea what you're doing, but you stay anyway. You're not a father. You're a ghost of something she spent her whole life trying to forget. Friedrich didn't answer, but his eyes didn't flinch. The hospital director arrived moments later to inform them that he had a legal right to see the children, supervised. Thomas couldn't stop it, but he stood by the door, watching as the man approached Lenny's crib. Then, something happened. The girl who'd been sound asleep started to stir. Her breathing quickened, and the moment Friedrich reached out to touch her face, she screamed, a shrill, panicked cry. Not the cry of a baby waking up, but the cry of someone who remembered something terrible. Friedrich backed away, startled. Doctors stepped in. Thomas stood there, his chest burning. Later, the hospital director came to him. "We'll document this. It was spontaneous. It'll matter in the process," but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like pain. On his way out, Friedrich turned back for one last stare. "This isn't over. I'll be back with a lawyer." Thomas didn't blink. "Bring the devil with you. It won't make a difference." But as the man vanished into the night, another shadow approached. On Thomas's phone, a new message appeared. No name, no contact, just a single sentence. "She told someone everything before she died, and that person knows more than you think." Morning crept slowly into the hospital, soft white light spilling into dim hallways. Thomas sat in the same chair as the night before, shirtless, the baby's blanket draped over his shoulders. His phone still glowed in his lap, the message pulsing like a whispered threat. She told someone everything before she died. And that person knows more than you think. But who? It wasn't Friedrich. He seemed more interested in control than truth. And Helena. She was the kind of woman who wore secrets like scars, visible only to those who looked closely. Thomas had never looked. Tom appeared without a sound. Sat beside him in silence. He held the blue book Clara had dropped before going to school. He opened it slowly, fingers brushing the pages like he was searching for a clue. Then he said, "She used to write in here." Thomas leaned in. On the final pages were scribbles, childlike markings, but among them one stood out, a line written in an adult's hand. "If anything happens to me, look for Elke at the community center." The name lit a spark. Elke, an old friend of Helena's, mentioned only twice, always as someone who could be trusted. Maybe she was the one who knew. Thomas stood suddenly. He told the medical staff he would be back soon, asked them not to let Friedrich near the children. They granted a few hours' leave, just enough to run to the nearest community center. The building was simple, graffiti on the walls, soup in the air. Inside, children's voices echoed through the halls. When he asked for Elke, a short woman with white hair appeared on the stairs. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "You're Helena's father," Thomas nodded. She came down slowly. When she reached him, she didn't hug him. She just looked into his eyes, as if weighing his soul. "You took your time." He swallowed, hard. "She's gone." Elke closed her eyes for a moment. "I know, she called me last week. Said she felt like something bad was coming. Said she was tired. Asked me to hold on to something." She led him to a small back room, opened an old drawer, pulled out a cardboard box. Inside, photos of Helena and the kids, diaries, medical records, and a sealed envelope. "She said this was for you, but only if you came to get it in person." Thomas took it with shaking hands. Elke stepped out, giving him space. He opened it. 3 handwritten pages. The first began without hesitation. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means that somehow you came back, and maybe now you understand." It was a letter without filters. She wrote that Friedrich had been violent, that he had threatened to take the children, that she had run out of fear and shame, that she'd tried to find Thomas, but never found the courage to face the eyes that judged instead of listened. "You kicked me out, but you never erased me. Every bad decision I made trying to survive and wondering what you'd say. I could never forget your last words. You're on your own now." The words cut like knives. He remembered that sentence, remembered how proud he'd been when he said it. And now, even from beyond, the grave, she was holding a mirror to his face. "But if you've made it this far, maybe you've changed. And if you've changed, maybe you're the only one left who can protect what I've left behind." The letter ended with clear instructions. "If Friedrich shows up, don't trust him. He wants the kids for government benefits. He knows how to manipulate. But the children know who he really is, and maybe they can still learn who you were." When Thomas returned to the hospital, his eyes were swollen, but his steps were steady. Then, something unexpected happened. Clara was there, sitting in the waiting room, the blue book in her hands. She had walked from school to the hospital on her own, just to give him the gift. "It's yours now," she said. "You listened all the way to the end. No one else ever did that for me." He knelt in front of her. "You don't have to forgive me, but if you can, let me learn to be what I wasn't." She didn't say anything, but she handed him the book, its dedication page still blank. "You write it," and he wrote, "For Clara, the girl who taught me that love is courage, and that sometimes it begins after the guilt." But the shadow still lingered, because Friedrich hadn't given up, and now he had a lawyer. That morning, for the first time in days, the sun came out. A timid golden light filtered through the windows of the children's hospital, casting a soft glow on the sleeping faces of the kids. As if, for a moment, the world outside had forgotten about urgency and pain. Thomas sat beside Emile's crib, watching the peaceful rise and fall of his youngest grandson's breath. Lenny slept in Tom's lap, who in turn rested his head against his grandfather's arm, like something inside him had finally let go during the night. Something had truly changed. At a nearby table, Clara was quietly drawing. She used colored pencils borrowed from a nurse and sketched the outline of a house with 4 windows and a clear sky above. It was the first time she'd ever drawn a house without walls. Thomas watched from the corner of his eye. He didn't want to interrupt. That small gesture, which he knew, was actually a sign of something bigger, a first glimpse of belonging. When she finished, she held up the paper and said, "This is the house I dreamed about. It smells like cake and music." He smiled with his eyes. "Do you sing in it?" "I do. And no one tells me to shut up." They both laughed, a laughter that still felt foreign but welcome. That's when Tom looked up and asked, "Are we going to live in a house like that?" Thomas hesitated. He didn't want to promise what he couldn't deliver. He didn't have full custody yet. He didn't know what Friedrich was planning, but then he thought of Elke, the letter, Helena's courage to trust, even without guarantees. He thought of the girl with the blue book, and of himself, of who he was becoming. "Yes," he said firmly. "You're going to have a home, no matter what I have to face to make that happen." Tom nodded. Clara drew a new tree, and for the first time she sketched 4 people beneath its shade, but Thomas had something he needed to do. He left the hospital with determined steps and went straight to the city registry office. He requested to begin the legal process of recognition. He knew it would take time, but he wanted to act before Friedrich did. When filling out the forms, he didn't hesitate. Name, address, occupation, and under relation, grandfather. Written in bold, proud letters, for the first time without fear. When he returned, he found Elke waiting in the hospital lobby. She held a black folder. Inside, more than memories, old documents Helena had entrusted to her, Tom's school records, Clara's birth certificate, medical reports, and a handwritten note, not legally binding but filled with meaning. A mother's last wish. "If I don't come back, he's the one who should raise them." Elke handed the folder over as if she were placing an entire life in his hands. "You have until the end of the week to gather everything. Friedrich already has a lawyer. He'll use every hole in your past against you." Thomas took a deep breath. "I know, but now I have a past too." That night he brought the children to a temporary shelter recommended by the social worker. It was a quiet house on the outskirts of town, with yellow doors, a place for families in transition, not quite home, but more than the road. Clara chose the upstairs room, said she wanted to see the stars. Tom fell asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around his siblings, and Thomas sat on the porch, looking up at the sky. He thought of Helena, of how everything now felt like a cycle finally beginning to close, not with an end but with a beginning. Then Clara joined him, still awake. "Are you scared?" she asked. "I am." "Of what?" "Of not being good enough. Of making the same mistakes." She thought for a moment, then said, "If you were really scared of that, you wouldn't be here." He looked at her as if seeing something new, something that might have always been there, and in that moment, and he understood. They didn't need a hero. They needed someone who stayed. Someone who looked them in the eyes and said, "I don't know how, but I'll be here," and he would stay. But the clock was still ticking, and Friedrich had already filed for custody. The Dresden family court was cold, with white walls and windows too high to see the sky. Thomas walked in with cold hands, but a straight back. On the left side, Friedrich was already seated, flanked by 2 attorneys in dark suits. He had the look of someone who already saw himself as the winner. Confidence in his posture, but also arrogance, as if victory was a birthright, not something earned. On the right, Thomas sat alone. No attorney, just a brown envelope filled with the documents Elke had given him, and the weight of all the years he had lived estranged from his daughter. He took his seat and breathed deeply. The judge entered. Slow steps, firm posture. Known for her strictness, this was only a preliminary hearing, but what happened here could define the fate of 3 lives forever. She started with Friedrich. His lawyer spoke first. With technical terms, legal citations, cold arguments, he presented proof of biological paternity. Said Friedrich wanted to take responsibility for his children, that he had every right to do so, that there was no evidence he had ever harmed the children's mother. Thomas kept his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. He knew feelings wouldn't be enough. He had to show something more. When it was his turn, he stood slowly. His voice at first was soft. "My name is Thomas Wagner. I'm the maternal grandfather of these children, and until 7 days ago, I was a man surrounded by success but completely empty." The judge listened without interrupting. "My daughter ran away from me 7 years ago. And she didn't run for no reason. I pushed her away, said terrible things. She left pregnant and never came back. Until now." He pulled the first letter from the envelope, the one he had found with her body. "She left me this. Gave me one last chance to fix what I broke." The judge called for silence. He went on. "I know I don't have biology on my side like he does, but I have something he doesn't. Presence. In the last few days, I've been a father to 3 children. I held them when they cried at night. I took them to the hospital. I cooked for them. I stayed. And sometimes, and staying is everything a child needs." Friedrich's attorney tried to object, but the judge raised her hand. "Go on." Thomas showed photos of the children with Helena, the medical reports, the handwritten note from Helena, and then her journal. She wrote about the abuse, about the fear. She ran from him, moved cities more than once. She knew he'd come back. The judge requested to review the documents. Friedrich shifted in his seat. He was starting to sweat. Then, something unexpected. Elke entered. The judge allowed her to testify voluntarily, and Elke spoke. She told them about the midnight phone calls, the quick, secret visits, how Helena would shake when she heard Friedrich's name. She described the night Helena cried for hours after dreaming he found the children. She was afraid until the very end, but she still trusted her father, even after everything. Friedrich stood abruptly, furious. "This is a lie. She was unstable. No one can prove she was sane." The worst thing he could have said. The judge stared at him. "Mr. Colby, sitting down is a choice, or you'll be removed." He backed down, but the damage was done. The hearing ended in silence. Outside, Thomas glanced at Friedrich one last time. He said nothing, but the look between them was clear. This was the end, not of a court case, but of a cycle, of a ghost, of guilt finally shifting hands. In the car outside, Clara, Tom, Lenny, and Emil waited with Elke. When Thomas got in and closed the door, Clara asked, "Is it over?" He looked at the 4 faces staring back at him and answered without hesitation, "Now it begins." That year, autumn had arrived more gently than usual. Leaves fell quietly onto the lawn of the small house on the outskirts of Leipzig. It was simple, a 2-story home with light wooden siding, flowered window boxes, and the constant smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen. Nothing about it resembled the cold hospital hallways or the hard benches of the courtroom. This was a beginning, fragile, but real. Thomas walked barefoot down the hallway. The framed pictures on the walls were Clara's drawings taped up unevenly, a house with 4 windows, a tree with 4 figures holding hands, a dog that didn't exist yet, but already had a name, Felix. In the backyard, Tom pushed Lenny gently on the swing. Emil slept in a stroller, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Clara sat on the garden wall, singing softly, as if her voice could reach something beyond the yard. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, watching in silence. He still woke some nights afraid it wasn't real, that it had all been a dream, that he was back in his glass office, meetings scheduled, no one waiting at home. But now, the sound of small footsteps in the hallway, the drawings on the furniture, the laughter cracking open the quiet, it all proved otherwise. He was here. And so were they. Elke came on weekends, like some kind of invisible guardian. She brought cakes, stories, and the same quiet strength Helena had once carried. She never said, "I forgive you," but she never left, either. That morning she brought a box. "It was your daughter's," she said. "I kept what I thought you'd be able to face one day." Thomas opened the box alone in the study. Inside were old photographs, a broken bracelet, and the first drawing Clara had ever made for her mother. A crooked sun with "Mommy" written backward, and a letter, not addressed to him, but to Clara. "My daughter, if you ever get to read this, know that I tried. With everything I had, I didn't always get it right, but I never stopped loving you, never stopped choosing you." He cried in silence. Clara walked in without knocking. She saw his wet face, saw the box, sat beside him and read the letter quietly. When she finished, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think she's happy now." Thomas looked at her. "Why?" "Because we're together, and because you finally learned how to stay." Stay. The one thing he never knew how to do. Something he'd learned too late, but still in time. The following Sunday, the local church organized a community picnic in the park. It was a tradition. Thomas didn't want to go. He still felt uncomfortable around families that hadn't failed like he had, but the kids insisted, and when Clara came out in a blue dress with a flower in her hair, he realized it wasn't about him. It was about her. So they went. At the park, Lenny crawled through the grass. Emil laughed as Tom blew soap bubbles from a makeshift cup. Clara sang for a small group of kids, using the party's toy microphone. Thomas watched from a distance. He felt small beside their strength, but for the first time, not ashamed, grateful. Elke sat beside him. "Your hands look different now," she said. "What do you mean?" "They used to shake when you held the past. Now they only tremble when you let go," he laughed. "I'm still scared. That never goes away. But now, you love in spite of it." That evening, Clara gave him a new drawing. It was the same house, 4 windows, the tree, the dog, but now in the sky, there was a figure with wings and a name written in the corner, Helena. "Is she watching us from up there?" Thomas asked. Clara nodded. "But she's not angry. She just didn't want us to get lost again." And they didn't. The next week, the judge signed the final custody order. There were no more objections. Friedrich had disappeared. No lawyers showed up. The case was closed. The shadow lifted. Thomas signed the papers with steady hands. Clara held his other hand. "So are you our dad again now?" He smiled. "No, I'm something I never was before. And I want to be that. Forever." And then came the most beautiful silence of all. The silence of peace. "Thanks for staying with us until the end. But don't go just yet. There's another powerful story waiting for you on the next screen. Click subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs it. I'll see you there.